German authorities have charged the suspect in the deadly attack on a Christmas market in Magdeburg with 5 counts of murder and several of attempted murder. 5 people died and more than 200 were injured when the man drove a car through crowds at the market on Friday night. Magdeburg is still struggling with what happened.
When faced with such horror, few here in Magdeburg can find the words. Hundreds gathered for a special memorial service at the city's cathedral, as it paid tribute to those killed on a night of Christmas carnage. Among the mourners inside, members of the emergency services and Germany's Chancellor and President.
We are here at the Magdeburg Cathedral tonight with feelings that cannot be put into words after one individual has violently ended the lives of 5 people so far and thrown many others off course.
Ahead of the service, bells rang out, exactly 24 hours after Friday's Christmas market attack.
You can't put it into words and understand it yourself. That's why we are here, to understand it and to express our sympathy.
It's a deep scar and we have to be together despite everything.
And as Magdeburg mourned, investigators revealed more about the man allegedly behind the attack. A 50-year-old from Saudi Arabia who's been in Germany since 2006. Detained at the scene on Friday night and taken into custody. Authorities say he acted alone, describing the suspect as Islamophobic.
It looks like the background of the offense could have been, how should I put this now, dissatisfaction with the treatment of Saudi Arabian refugees in Germany. But what lies deeper behind this is the subject of the investigation.
Magdeburg's Christmas market will remain shut for the rest of the season. Instead, the crowds can be found here at a nearby vigil. A growing memorial to 3 minutes of tragedy that will last a lifetime for so many here.
Let's get more on this from our political correspondent, Hans Brandt. Welcome, Hans. Inevitably, there is debate about public security. Authorities have been defending the security measures that were in place. So what appears to have gone wrong?
Well, it's almost exactly 8 years ago that we had the worst such attack here in Germany. That was on a Christmas market here in Berlin, where 13 people were killed when a truck was driven by an Islamist into a Christmas market. Since then, security has been significantly increased in such gatherings. So the question is, how was it even possible that this alleged attacker drove a car could be driven into a Christmas market at all? The authorities say that he was using a route reserved for emergency services, but even that should have been blocked. So the questions, I think, are reasonable and need to be answered. The authorities in Magdeburg say that they had only recently increased security at this market. So it remains open. The question remains open, but certainly security has once again been increased at Christmas markets across Germany.
Right. And of course, much conflicting speculation about the motivation for this attack from this suspect referred to as Talib A.
Yes, he in fact is not a person unknown to the public, strangely enough. He is somebody that has been talking to journalists for many years as a Saudi activist against Islam. He described himself as the most severe critic of Islam imaginable in an interview with a newspaper a few years ago. He has a very prominent profile on a social media profile. So he is in some sense known to the authorities, known to journalists. He's somebody who's been involved in apparently helping women who try to escape from Saudi Arabia, for instance, from arranged marriages, that sort of thing. But he has been saying in recent years also to journalists that he sees the German authorities doing too little against Islam. That's the kind of criticism. Why that could motivate him to drive a car into a Christmas market, as he is alleged to have done, remains totally unclear.
And some dissatisfaction with the treatment of Saudi refugees in Germany.
Well, he's a Saudi refugee himself. He was given asylum as somebody persecuted by the Saudi regime. So there were reports that the Saudis themselves warned German authorities against him. But obviously, under these circumstances, when he's regarded as somebody persecuted by the Saudi authorities, those warnings may not have been taken particularly seriously. So it's a very, very complex situation, and certainly not a clear indication of his motives and what kind of mental state he was in recent weeks.
On those warnings from Saudi authorities, there are reports that German authorities did actually look into those and were at one point monitoring this guy. So there's a whole other can of worms to be.
Well, he doesn't fit into this kind of scheme, a kind of pattern of people that the German authorities would be following and would be kind of looking at more precisely. He's neither a right-wing extremist, although that is where his political sympathies seem to have been with the populist AfD here in Germany, with anti-Islamic movements in Germany, and he's not obviously a classic Islamist suspect. So the authorities, I think, in the end, did not really concentrate very intensely on him, even though he was known.
There is to be an election here in Germany in February. Is this attack likely to feed into campaigning?
Absolutely. I think there's already a lot of debate about it, but the fact that it is such a difficult to pin down, this is actually making things, as it were, difficult also for political parties. For instance, I was talking about the populist AfD and Alternative for Germany party, which is doing very well in polls at the moment. They would be expected to see this as a refugee or a migrant, an asylum person in Germany committing an atrocity, committing an attack, and would try to use it for their political ends in this manner. But at the same time, he is somebody who very often has posted his support for this AfD party. So there have also been gatherings of right-wing extremists in Magdeburg during the weekend trying to say that this is an indication of people that are not from Germany, threatening Germany's society. But all of this makes it very difficult. I think what you can say basically is that feelings of insecurity in German society are increased by this. The feeling that in public gatherings you cannot be secure, and that there may be some connection to a migration sort of story, which is something that most German parties would probably try to avoid during the election campaign.
Right, thank you for that, Hans. We'll leave it there. DW political correspondent Hans Brandt.
And I'm now joined by Peter Smith. He's an analyst focused on extremism, terrorism and conflicts, and he joins me from Toronto. It's good to have you on the programme, Peter. So the authorities here in Germany are describing the suspect as Islamophobic. You've had a look into his social media accounts, X and other platforms. What do you make of his statements?
Yeah, it's certainly important to exercise a high degree of caution when talking about individuals' motivations in the wake of particularly devastating attacks. However, what is plain to see looking into this individual on their social media account is a very blatant and often conspiratorial form of Islamophobia. We're dealing with someone who's very well known in certain activist circles and has a fairly sizable following as a result of that on the platform X. He used this platform to speak out not just against the Saudi government, but also make repeated accusations against the German state, engaging in a campaign of what he might call Islamicizing Germany. And this is a man who has repeatedly posted that he's being pursued by security services and state authorities in Germany as part of a broader agenda to silence dissidents like him. Right.
So we now know that security services had been aware of him. They'd even looked into him and at some stage decided that he was no concrete danger. Why do you think that is? And could the fact that, I mean, this is a 50-year-old doctor, could that have played a role?
Certainly it could. It's a difficult and troubling question. It does seem like there were multiple reports of individuals who had reached out and were trying to raise red flags about him, particularly due to kind of aggressive and erratic behavior. There definitely needs to be an investigation. The public needs to be aware of kind of who knew what and when, not necessarily to lay blame or assign fault, though there may come a time for that as well. Intervening against attacks carried out by lone actors is often very difficult. But just given just how many people seem to have come forward, I'd be interested to know who spoke to him and when, what those interactions were like, and if he was continuing to be monitored, and if not, why not?
Peter, could the suspect have been stopped, and how would the authorities have done that?
It is difficult when a person hasn't committed a criminal act to say if there could be an intervention there. He obviously seemed like a very erratic and aggressive individual. That's why there needs to be kind of investigation about how security services handle these types of cases, and if all leads are being taken seriously or not, so we don't end up with the type of situation that we had the other night.
We've obviously been talking about his activity on social media platforms like X, and from your expertise with terrorism and radicalization, what role do these platforms like X play when it comes to the radicalization of individuals? And perhaps how's this changed? I mean, we're talking about X now, one of the most prominent platforms, and there have been significant changes since Elon Musk took over that platform.
Yeah, it's kind of across the West, in Europe, in North America, even South America, we're seeing a rise of the far right, not just politically, but also socially and on the streets. Musk's statements about the AfD were particularly ill-timed, and he's a man who insists on kind of making a spectacle of himself. But I think what is the bigger issue that we're seeing is that there's an increasing acceptance of the ideology and narratives presented by the far right, not just in the fringes, but in mainstream political discourse. These things obviously kind of fester online, and often they were confined to smaller spaces, kind of spread out more. And X has, I think, in its new direction and mission statement, provided a bit of a home for that. Certainly not to downplay the seriousness or anything of the gains made by the AfD in certain regions of Germany, but this goes beyond one political party or entity, as we see narratives and talking points kind of intrude into mainstream politics.
And just bringing it back to the suspect, Peter, this point about his profile, did it come as a surprise to you that somebody of this profile, a 50-year-old, a doctor, would do something like this?
I mean, his attack was unique in its brutality and kind of the indiscriminatory nature of the violence. He's certainly not the only well-educated older man that we've seen carry out terrorist attacks, if that's what this is determined to be. There's radicalization takes all sorts. It certainly is something I think that we do associate with the young. They're often the most optimistic, the most kind of impressionable. But no, there have been, typically in different types of ideologies, there have been kind of older individuals who've carried out these types of actions. It's not to say that this situation isn't unique.
Well, Peter Smith, we appreciate your insights here on DW. Thanks very much.
No, it's a pleasure being here.